gentlemen, our next speaker, Frank Raymond, hails from the Indian subcontinent, but he has broad exposure to Western culture all his life. As such, he has an outsider's insight into the Western culture and its unique qualities. He has written a book that, among other things, talks about distinctiveness of the Western mind. The book is Sweet Dreams and Terror Cells. Given that the white population are diminishing and that mass immigration is one of the causes, Frank has studied the mass immigration phenomena to discover the drivers and hidden motives underlying it. The topic of his speech is Fraudulent Constructions of the Meaning of Nation and State, Devices for the Destruction of the West. Please join me, welcome Frank Raymond to the podium.
Thank you. Good morning. It's an honor to address such a distinguished gathering. I'd like to start by taking you back about a month or two to an incident that happened in Washington, D.C. A bunch of school kids from Covington, Kentucky were at the Capitol. They had been there for a March for Life, and they were just sightseeing. Suddenly, a group of black people who call themselves Black Hebrews, if you can believe that they think they're Hebrews, but they do, started shouting the most vile abuse at them. And you could expect violence from the tenor, the vileness of it, and the anger. You could expect them to be physically attacked. They called them dirty-ass crackers and babies of incest. I'll forbear from going into the more vulgar epithets. But then these blacks were also yelling at a bunch of Native Indians. In the middle of this, a Native Indian activist of 30 years standing, and he's an activist, which means he's a troublemaker, and a skilled troublemaker at that. He decided he'd take advantage of this, and he marched up to a bunch of white kids and started banging a drum right in their face. He stood inches away from one of these kids, banged a drum, and started chanting a barbaric chant. Obviously, as became clear, his purpose was to provoke these kids, to get them to say stop it, and then he could start an incident and vilify Whitey once again. But what did he have? He knew he would get away with this because he knows there's an alien-controlled media that will always lie, conceal, and vilify Whitey. He knew that. He expected the support of this media, and he got it. Within the evening, you saw a picture of this boy standing awkwardly and grinning, and there they were threatening this poor Native Indian guy. They were insulting him, and he said in various interviews that they surrounded him, and he felt very threatened. Well, in the middle of that, an East Indian immigrant, I believe he's an immigrant, Reza Aslan, who was once on CNN, sent out a tweet saying, "Have you ever seen a more punchable face than that of that white kid?" He wanted to punch that kid. So if you think about it, at the end of it, I saw the summary by Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo of CNN after the facts were out. After the facts were out that it was the blacks who started the violence and the Native Indian was an injure provocateur, a troublemaking, sly, crafty character. But their summing up was very simple. That, you know what I have to say about this, he said, those kids, they should not have been wearing a MAGA hat. Their parents should be thoroughly admonished. That's not right. That's not right. That's not right. You don't do that. Not a word of condemnation for the black, violent people who had such filthy racial epithets. Not a word of condemnation for the sly, crafty Indian. It's just those whites are always the devil. So if you think about it, they all have the same agenda. The Native Indian who tried this trick, a lifelong activist, and lefty, which means he's an anti-white. That's all it means, left-wing. The blacks who have such hatred. The East Indians who reacted predictably, saying they want to punch them, and the Jews who control CNN and MSNBC. To put it in vulgar language, everyone wants a piece of your ass. Okay? This would not happen if whites lived in a country of their own, with their own media, and free from the presence of and hostility of aliens. It would be what I saw a couple of weeks ago in Coeur d'Alene or Spokane. It would be they would live in a peaceful, harmonious society of their own, with their own culture. So you have to understand from this one fragment and multiply it with the millions of such fragments going on every day, what is said on every channel, every evening, every morning, that the whites of all the multiracial countries are now people under occupation and worse, colonization and genocide. They're under laws that render them slaves, fearful to speak, fearful to even say the name of their people, we white people. You'll never hear that. Fearful to speak for their interests as a group. And worse, their very minds are occupied, stupefied by the constant, unending barrage of propaganda, both blatant and insidious, that rains upon them from every university, television channel, movie, and newspaper. In sum, they're in a dangerous situation, 2 generations away from total genocide, and it is especially dangerous because alien enemies control the media, the medium of information, discussion, and of the formation of the thoughts in your mind. It is necessary to see through the fog and the mental tricks, and there are many deceptions and mental tricks. Today, I'll discuss just one of them. I shall discuss one of those swindles. It is the perversion of the very meaning of the terms nation and country. I'll just make a request, sir. Can you tell me 5 minutes ahead? Yeah. What is a nation? From time immemorial, it's been a racial group, a subgroup of the human species. Julius Caesar came to Gaul, and in the Jura Mountains, he encountered the nation of the Helvetii. They were on the move, searching for a new homeland. Today, the Swiss still use the term Helvetia to refer to themselves, to denote that they are the descendants, the race of the Helvetii. The Jews are scattered all over the planet, yet they are a nation, a racial group that feels a sense of togetherness, unity, commonality, and common purpose. But a nation to survive and flourish and live out its race soul needs a parcel of land that they and only they occupy. A nation that has a land, territory of its own, calls it their homeland. And when a nation, a racial group, has its own land, then we have a nation state. Then we have a country. A country is the combination of a race group with a specific territory. Japan is the combination of the Nipponese race with the 4 islands that make up the territory of Japan. If you replace the Japanese people with, say, Congolese on those 4 islands, it will not be Japan anymore. The Swedes are being replaced on their land rapidly. When the Swedish people are replaced, it will not be Sweden anymore. For a while, the Africans and Arabs there will call it Sweden, but soon the colonists will speak their ethnic languages, and they will give the territory a new name, if they can remain united and not have a bloody race war of who will enjoy the land, the Africans or the Arabs. So there you have the 2 elements of a country and of a nation state, the race and the territory, blood and soil. Note that Canada is not a real country anymore. It is a state, but it is not a nation state. Hence, it is not a country. All states that are not nation states inevitably dissolve and end up in chaotic misery. They all do. Canadians can look forward to the same. Blood and soil, an evil Nazi term, an evil ideology. A man named Ken Livingstone, former mayor of London, had the nerve to speak the truth that the Zionists of the 1930s had a fruitful collaboration with Hitler's regime. Well, you can't say that. The British Parliament held an inquiry to school this obstreperous voice. An interesting hearing. It's available on YouTube. In this hearing, a leader of the Scottish National Party felt obliged to say that the SNP did not have a blood and soil ideology. It believed in diversity and inclusion. It does. But an idiot like myself has to ask the question, if so, why separate from the Federation of Britain on the basis of the blood and soil of the Scottish ethnicity and Scottish soil? Why, if you don't believe in blood and soil? What a buffoon. Here, here, we are obedient to the New World Order, so we don't believe in blood and soil. Yet almost every person at this hearing paid obeisance and bent the knee before Israel, a nation-state founded and based upon blood and soil. And none of them seemed to quite grasp that this was a contradiction. The chairman of the hearing, one Keith Vaz, member of parliament, listened to a Jew praise the fact that Israel had a democracy, and he felt obligated to forget his neutral role as chairman and say in saccharine and respectful tones, "And it is exciting." He had to add that. You've got to pay obeisance. Truly, we live in interesting times. And the most potent of Chinese curses was, "May you live in interesting times." A racial group can best preserve its existence, flourish, and live the culture and mind soul of its blood if it has a nation state. If it occupies a piece of land and makes its own decisions within its state and through the government of its state structure. But then we have the sneak rulers who seek to enslave, genocide, and replace the white peoples on their lands. They know that the nation state is the sole protection for these peoples, and they seek to destroy these nation states, primarily with colonization working under the mask of multiculturalism. They created the European Union and took the government away from the nation states so they can no longer operate as nation states. The British found that the European Union was pumping aliens onto their land and realized they had to regain their sovereignty. They had to have their own nation state to assert their own will with the strength of the nation state mechanism through a government of their own. We, as the sole people on our land, will make our decisions as to who will enter and live in Britain, thus Brexit. But will they get Brexit? So the white peoples, like all peoples, like the Chinese, like the Japanese, need their nation states, their countries. The sneak rulers, and now the aliens who are greedy for these green lands, these fertile territories, know that they must destroy the white nation states. They have many means for doing so, and one means is the swindle regarding the meaning and value of country and nation state. They have formulated fraudulent constructs of nation and state, and they tell you that your countries are not, in fact, countries at all. Next, they'll tell you that the bread you eat is not bread, so hand it over, buddy, without any qualms. Swindle number one. About a year ago, Tucker Carlson of the Fox News Network remarked that in Arizona and the other border states, more than half the children in the schools were mestizo, arrived from Latin America in the last 25 years. And what did he say? He said it is as if the border had moved north. Well, that caused paroxysms of rage in the control media, the alien control media, among the pundits and talking heads. This is an ignorant bigot, a racist baboon. Doesn't he know that America is far above old-fashioned and tribal notions of state and country and land? It is noble and transcendent. America is an idea. Doesn't this fool know that? America is an idea. That's what they said on almost every channel. So I wonder if someone will be a little help to me and step up for a minute. Anyone? Any volunteer? Anyone? Do you have a wallet, madam?
Do you want a date?
A wallet?
Yes.
These green tools.
Oh, the danger.
You have mine.
My husband leave the room.
Just your wallet. No, it looks pretty valuable to you. You could get a few meals and eat from it.
I think so.
The money, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
But, I think that's just an idea. I think that's just an idea, and you can't eat an idea, can you? You don't really need an idea. It's not something you can eat or sleep in or live on. It's just an idea, so I think I'll keep it, and you won't fight me for it.
You bet.
It's just an idea. I only have 5 minutes more, so there's not much time. When Americans conquered and tamed and civilized the land because for them it was a place to live in, it was essential as your apartment or house is to everyone here in this room. They needed to grow crops on, to draw water from, They wanted to bequeath to their descendants vast and spacious lands, broad acres, to have clean air, clean water, plentiful minerals, wide vistas of beauty and wonder. The land is a tangible asset of inestimable worth. The Israelis and the Palestinians know the value of land because they fight for every inch of it, for every aquifer that supplies the water that is vital to life. But the swindlers will tell you it's not tangible, not essential for eating and surviving. It's an empty idea. Swindle number 2, and I'm running short of time here. I had a lot to say, but I'll just get to one more swindle. When I spoke at this symposium last year, a man asserted that a nation is defined by its values, not its race. So America is not defined by the fact, repeat fact, that the US state was founded by white people, including Thomas Jefferson and Daniel Boone, Lewis and Clark for white people. But I have to ask, is a country defined by its values? Really? Consider Hungary. The Magyar race has lived on its land as a nation-state for millennia. For values, they had many. Among them, they held the value of free enterprise and the sturdy, independent individual who stood on his own feet. Then they were occupied by the Bolsheviks, indoctrinated with collectivist communist values. And they had to live those values for half a century. With the fall of the Soviet Union, they switched back to individualistic values. But Hungary remained, and still remains, the country of the Magyar race. Hungary consists of the life stream of the Magyar race, something eternal, far above values or social values that change from day to day, year to year. Now, this is not something that just this man said. It's repeated all over. For instance, I once read in the National Post a small article by one Mr. Fogel, chairman of the Canadian Jewish Congress. At that time, they called it the CIJA. And he wrote that Canada, like all other enlightened nations, is defined by values. As long as people have shared values, it makes a great country. But Mr. Fogel is the chairman of the CIJA, which are staunch supporters of Israel, which certainly is not based on values. It's a blood and soil country. So I doubt his sincerity here. To understand the fraud, consider that you have a wife and children and live with them in your house. Now, if a street bum were to say that he shares some values with you, such as the value of universal suffrage, equal pay for equal work, being charitable at Christmas time, would you let him move into your house and take over a bedroom? Yet many Americans are prepared to hand over their territory and surrender their schools to alien children that replace the children of their folk in the classrooms and desks, muttering, oh, so long as they have the same values, so long as they subscribe to American values. Now, I'm reminded of something I saw on television. A young woman was a member of some Jewish organization in the US. And some people had said, we're kind of sick of paying out vast sums of money in various forms to Israel. You know, you're exploiting us, you're sucking our blood. Well, this young Jewish woman responded, you haven't yet mentioned the shared values that unite America and Israel. She takes cold, hard cash from American pockets and deludes you with smirking offers of empty values. Kind of like the scallywags who gave the emperor clothes made of air until a youngster shouted out, the emperor has no clothes, and soon white people will have no land. So, at the end of it, I'd say regarding this argument about values, yes, a nation does have certain essential values. You know what they are? The essential value of a nation is its race and ethnicity. The second value is the land it lives on. Those are the two values. If you'll allow me, I could say more, but if you like, I can continue at some other time. Okay.
Your panel continues after this.
Well, then why don't I just, I'll try to use lunchtime to make a few more points. How's that? Okay?